I've always been open about the fact that I wasn't the strongest programmer, but I got through Purdue. So I don't know if that says anything, but he offered to work with me on this project. And then I think I got kind of gave him the hint that, first of all, I was dating my now boyfriend at the time. And I was like, I'm not interested. Like, let's just keep this professional, And he ended up basically ghosting me, stopped wanting to help me. I asked this a question on a Blackboard board one time, and he told me everyone thought I was stupid for asking this one question. And that was probably one of the harder moments, because then how you kind of think people feel that way about you, and then you really hear it. That was tough. And I remember calling my parents crying, I wanted to quit. That was when I wanted to leave and just transition into maybe another major. And, my dad was just at the time, he's like, you know what, Simone, you're going to end up leading a team of these kinds of software developers. Don't put too much stock in this. And at the time I was like, oh, okay, Dad, whatever, sure. But now that I'm here, it's was right.
What up, and welcome back to Custom Journeys, the podcast that spotlights Black and brown voices in STEM. My name is Eliseo Iglesias, and I'm here with my co-host, Andrew Baines. Please watch, like, and subscribe to the pod on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and YouTube. You can also follow the pod on Instagram by searching at Custom Journeys. That's CUSTEM Journeys. We're really excited today to have our guest today, Simone May. And Simone May is the co-founder and CTO of Clutch, a student-to-student side hustle marketplace. She has a bachelor's degree in computer science from Purdue University. Thank you, Simone, so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks again, Simone. So Simone, I'm really excited about this interview. I first heard about you and your co-founder actually on LinkedIn. I was just scrolling through there. And I know Houston has a big innovation center that's trying to grow and everything like that. And I think there was a big announcement about you guys, starting Clutch or pivoting to Clutch. And I was like, yo, I think she would be perfect, especially because you have such a strong technical background. So really excited to hear some of your story today. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. And I can just go ahead and quickly introduce myself.
Yeah, go ahead.
Too. So outside of the knowledge that Eli just shared with you all, I'm also from Atlanta, Georgia. And prior to, leaving my job at Accenture, I was a technology consultant for 3 years, which is also what was super pivotal in me joining as CTO and co-founder of Clutch.
Since we're starting to talk about Clutch a little bit, can you kind of tell people what is Clutch and what is it about?
Yeah. So as Eli touched on it, it is a student-to-student marketplace. But what I think really sets Clutch apart from other marketplaces is that it is a platform that enables students with side hustles to market and sell their services to other students on their university or other universities right now here in Houston. So let's say you know how to do hair, or you've been playing around with photography as a student, and you haven't really found a way to market your services as a freshman or sophomore on campus. You can join our platform as a provider. It's what we call you guys, or a side hustler. You set up your business, you set up your provider profile. You don't necessarily have to have a business name, but after that, you can set up your services, you set your own prices, and you set your own availability. So everything is in your hands, and it gives you room to be autonomous, especially in this world of gig economy and Gen Z. We really want to make sure that you guys can specify your individualistic needs, I guess, and market them on this platform. And we also do assist as a company with marketing and selling your services as well.
I love that idea. I wish it was around back when I was in college, because I had a hard time when I first moved to San Antonio from Houston finding a barber.
Yes.
A barber and a church are always the two hardest things to find when you're moving to a new city. So, yeah.
So true. And that's actually how the idea came about for us. Myself and my co-founder are both Black women, and we went to Purdue. And I don't know if anyone knows where Purdue is. I think they're #1 basketball team this year at some point. So I know everyone probably knows who we are now. But when I went to Purdue, no one knew where it was. And I found out on accident that we were in the middle of Indiana. So I'm from Atlanta, like I just said, which is the hair capital of the
Yeah.
world. I never struggled with finding somewhere to get my hair done. And now I'm in West Lafayette and I don't know anybody and I have nowhere to get my hair done. And I'm a freshman on campus. I don't want to just start walking up to people and be like, hey, like, you know how to do black hair? Like, no. So it really does like open the floor even for the people who are kind of nervous or new to the city. And you can like, in a more organic way, find someone to help you get tutoring, or if you want to do like a photo shoot for your birthday or whatever. That's kind of where this idea originated from.
It's dope. I love it. I'm just imagining you walking around campus with like, hey sis, can you hook me up, bro? I need like a wash and go, twist out, something, please.
I would drive, and I had a car. So luckily, like my sophomore year, my best friend Madison, again, we were best friends before we were co-founders, and she had a hair lady, but the lady was an hour away.
Okay.
So it was like, and she cost more. So I eventually found someone my junior year, but it took me 3 years to basically find somewhere to get my hair done on campus.
Struggle.
From a student. It was from my now line sister. Her name was Taylor.
I got you. Dope. Cool. Yeah.
She might be mad if I call her out. I'm going to tell her I said it.
All right.
Said her name on the podcast.
Awesome. Yeah. I can relate to that. I remember my wife, we were dating in college, and like that was her hardest thing, is like finding a beautician. So I'm with you. I got you. Mm-hmm. All right, cool. So we're going to talk about how you kind of got your start in STEM in a little bit. But first, I want to ask you a question related to Clutch. So I actually got the opportunity to talk to some high school students maybe like 2 weeks ago. And I definitely plugged you guys, mentioned you guys, 'cause I think what you guys are doing great.
Thank you.
And one of the cool things about it, or one of the ways I try to relate to the students, is telling them that about your journey to raising $1 million in investment money so far, just in the initial stages. So a round of applause to you for that, you and Madison.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I did a little bit of research, or we talked about this at Rice, but only 0.34% of all investment dollars go to companies started by Black women or women of color. So can you kind of talk about that journey briefly of raising money, and what advice could you give to other entrepreneurs who are hoping to also raise money for their ventures?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can't talk about this journey unless I talk about the moment we pivoted, because when we originally started this company, it was actually supposed to be, just quickly, for stadiums in-seat concession delivery. Sorry, I got stumbled on my words. And we had to pivot because of the pandemic. This was 2 years ago. And then we pivoted to now wanting to serve as an on-demand service for students who want to order their food to their dorm from dining hall. So if you want to order your food for pickup or delivery, we're used to that. We have Uber Eats. And that was the point at which we decided to launch the product and start selling it, and also raising money to build it. When we were raising money, I think one of the first things that stuck out was people would just say, oh, that's a great idea, but we just can't help you at the time, right now. And that was like the consistent message we kept getting with this, trying to raise money with the idea of, selling into universities and allowing students to use our app to buy food or whatever. And one of the things that we noticed was that people kept saying no, but they just didn't say why. And so, Madison, she did a majority of the raising, but something that she always says and notes with me is, no is never no. It's just a step in the next direction to yes. Gotcha. So we got I almost want to estimate probably 50 rejections from at least 50 investment firms, analysts to, principals or MDs at these, what we call VCs, so venture capital firms. So eventually we got to the point where we pitched yet again. And one of the partners looked us dead in our face and said, we wouldn't invest in this, and here's why. We finally got to the why after talking to 50 people. And so when he said that, it clicked for us that that's why we've been getting all this rejection. Outside of the fact that a lot of people we saw we would pitch with, sometimes we would go to these like big pitch days, they didn't even have a product. So it's like we had to work extremely hard to even get into these pitch days with a full product. And a lot of these people who did not look like us would be sitting in the pitch day like this, you know, with the in their pajamas, like had like a, you know, pitch deck and everything was like, oh yeah, here it is. And they were getting way more traction and advice than us. And it would just be like, why is it that we come buttoned up, we work extra hard, we bring all of ourselves to the table, and you guys can't even give us a reason why you don't want to invest? I think that for me was the hardest part in terms of, you know, when we're talking about diversity inclusion, like the level of care wasn't there for us. And I think that the partner we did talk to was Black, and he was the one that gave us that extra tidbit of information that led us to pivot to now enabling side hustlers. And from then on, once we pivoted, you know, we had probably pitched to at least 30 more people, but we ended up having a cap table that was all Black or brown. So now our entire cap table is Black and brown, even still, which is, you know, incredible. But I think the most difficult part about pitching, and I'm sure Madison could shed far more light on this than I could, but was the fact that we had a product and we still weren't getting, in my opinion, the level of attention and care that I think some other founders do get with just an idea.
Gotcha. Quick follow-up before Eli takes over. So all those no's, I'm glad you said that you had to go through 50 no's before getting even just feedback. It sounds like getting that feedback was like the pivotal piece that kind of helped you guys adjust and pivot to get the funding. Was it just a matter of you guys not asking them for feedback, or them not being willing to give it to you when asked?
I think I would say it was a mix of both. I mean, if we had the time, like if we could, you know, have the time on that call and say, okay, can you give us like,
Gotcha.
you know, some feedback? The feedback would even just be something along the lines of, oh, you guys are too early.
Okay.
We're like, we have a product. This is technically pre-seed, which means you're pre-revenue, but it's like, come on, that's not a real answer. So
I got you.
When we did ask for feedback, it was not nearly as straightforward as when we got it.
Cool.
From the partner at Mercury.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Simone, it's a testament to you and your co-founder, to the resilience you had to build up to acquire that funding. And what a lot of people don't know is the additional hurdles people of color face, especially when getting funding for ventures like this. And so thank you for sharing that, for sure. Now, earlier no problem. Earlier you referenced some culture shock issues, perhaps on campus as an undergrad. Me and Andrew both shared our versions of it when we early on in the pod. But going back to your college experience, what got you interested in majoring in computer science, and is that what you started with when you enrolled into Purdue?
Yes. So I come from a family of engineers, and I knew I really enjoyed math and science. I also took like an HTML course at my high school. So I knew I wanted to do engineering, which narrowed down the pool of schools that I wanted to apply to. And being from Atlanta, Georgia Tech was down the street. So I was like, I want to go somewhere, you know, far from home. And ultimately, that's how I landed at Purdue. I got in early acceptance, and then I did apply to be in the computer science program. And being fully transparent, when I was coming out of school, I wasn't like a straight A student. Okay. I was like, I just would get the GPA I needed at my high school to like not have to take finals in the spring, which is like, I think a 3.2. They called it Silver Eagle. Okay. So I would basically do the bare minimum to get that. So I actually didn't get accepted into the engineering school at Purdue, and the computer science program wasn't technically a part of the engineering program at Purdue. And it was a lot more flexible. You could have a minor with a computer science degree versus I was also interested in industrial engineering, and you couldn't have a minor with an engineering degree at Purdue unless you went to graduate in 5 years. So
right.
Like they didn't even make it possible. It doesn't make any sense, but.
Gotcha. Dope. So, You say you weren't the strongest student in high school, and I think a lot of our guests actually kind of have a similar background in terms of, hey, everybody wasn't a 4.0, especially the 4.0 student, especially in high school. A lot of people like just kind of messed around, didn't really take it as serious as they should have. But
Yes.
Purdue is a good school, great school, and computer science up there with like mechanical engineering is definitely like one of the most rigorous like programs you could take. Could you talk about like some of the challenges that you faced, maybe from a technical standpoint at Purdue as a computer science major, and how you overcame those?
So I think at the time that I came in as a freshman, there were like 5 Black women
Mhm.
total that were a part of the computer science program. And I came in, like I said, I was a decent student out of high school. I went to a good high school. I also had engineering parents. So I think I had the village behind me to have the confidence walking in. But I remember there was this math class. Oh my God. And I was like, that was the one subject I knew I was strong in. Well, I guess not, because when I first got there and I was in this math class, I was like, I am struggling. Like, why is this so difficult? And then on top of that, I'm now learning, I think at the time you learned object-oriented programming in Java. And so I'm being hit in the face with this completely new language, which, like, if anyone has ever programmed before, learning a new language like French or Spanish, that's like what learning a new programming language is. You're literally learning all the new ways in which you can write a sentence, basically. That's learning a new programming language. So I'm learning Java. I'm learning what object-oriented programming is. And I'm also struggling in this subject that I thought that I was really strong in. And one of the most difficult things that I learned is that there were students who didn't know what they were doing and still getting support from other students in this class. And then there was me, because there were a handful of very intelligent people who'd been programming since before they got to school. And they were helping their buddies out. There were projects where they would go. We had Lawson, and Lawson had this basement, and the buddies would get together, they'd get in a group, and one person would be helping like 5 people. And, nobody offered to help. And then even when I asked, I was met with a lot of skepticism. Like, I think people really didn't believe that. I don't know if it's that they didn't believe deserved to be there. They didn't think I was going to make it. I don't know what it was, but it was just not, I was not met with the same welcome that I think I noticed other students were, because, there's only one building for computer science. So everyone goes to that one building all year for all the projects, everyone from freshmen to seniors. So it's one of those communities that's like extremely tight knit. And you can tell when you're kind of the outsider, and that's how it felt. It was just me and my friend, Deshawn, and we would work together. I leveraged resources from NSBE because NSBE would pay for tutoring services. And so to get through my first year, I leveraged my community in NSBE with like my math and other math and science courses. We were all like a tight knit group, but when it came to the, computer science strictly classes, I, ended up trying to find tutoring. I think I retook quite a few classes, to be honest. But one thing I didn't do was give up, because I don't take no for an answer. And I knew that even if programming wasn't going to be my journey or my path, I knew that the way it taught me to think was. So.
Gotcha. I love that. I'm glad you shared that too, that vulnerability, because I think a lot of people think that, they can go the STEM route. Number one, I think some people don't think they're smart enough to go the STEM route. But then number two, I feel like some people think, oh, everything will just come to you easy. And I think a lot of times, as soon as you feel like you have everything figured out, life will just kind of hit you in the mouth and be like, you thought you were great at math. Let me tell you otherwise. So I'm glad you
Yes.
shared that. And not only that, but then also like resources like NSBE, which seems to come up in like everybody's story that we interview.
Huge game changer. Huge game changer.
Yeah. And you also mentioned that like you were one of 5 maybe Black women on campus. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about like what your experience was like in such a male dominant field? Because I mean, barely few women, and
Yes.
especially very few Black women on campus doing computer science or engineering. How was that experience?
Yes. I mean, I think a lot of Black engineers or Black people in general at PWIs know what it's like when you walk in the room and you're looking around for people that look like you. So that was my experience in all of my classes. That was one of the challenges. I think just like walking in a room every day, knowing you stick out, and also knowing that people don't see you as a like an asset, like a, you know, somebody that's worthy of being here. And then I would say, tied into that, I even had an experience with somebody who was a Black programmer, and I think he wanted to date me like junior year. I told you about this,
Yeah.
Andrew, and I was like, you know, he was helping me with a project, and I was like, okay, sweet. Like, he wants to work with me. This is really exciting. Somebody who seems to know what they're doing, wants to help. Again, I've always been open about the fact that I wasn't the strongest programmer, but I got through Purdue. So I don't know if that says anything, but he offered to work with me on this project. And then I think I got like kind of gave him the hint that, first of all, I was dating my now boyfriend at the time. And I was like, I'm not interested. Like, let's just keep this professional, you know? And he ended up like basically ghosting me, like stopped wanting to help me. I asked us like a question on a Blackboard board one time, and he told me everyone thought I was stupid for asking this one question. And that was probably one of the harder moments studying, because then, like, you know how you kind of think people feel that way about you, and then you like really hear it. That was tough. And I remember calling my parents crying, like I wanted to quit. That was when I wanted to leave and just transition into maybe another major. And my dad was just like, at the time, he's like, you know what, Simone, you're gonna end up like leading a team of these kinds of software developers. This is don't put too much stock in this. And at the time I was like, "Ugh, okay, Dad, whatever, like, sure." But now that I'm here, it's like, oh, maybe he was right. I mean, was right.
Yeah.
So, staying motivated through those times is really about like reaching back to your village, reaching back to the people that love and know you the best, and understanding that you're here and you deserve to be here, even if other people don't think that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you persevered through that and you shared that, because I think, again, you don't have to be an A student to go through STEM. And I think, honestly,
Agreed.
I can probably I've got a bachelor's and a master's in mechanical engineering. Eli has a PhD. I can probably name
Wow, that's also incredible.
Yes, it is amazing.
Congratulations to you guys.
Thank you. Mainly Eli. I mean, I just kind of, I don't know how he did a PhD, but I'm proud of him. But I can probably list like maybe 4 or 5 classes max. I'm not even gonna say 4 classes max that actually I can relate to, like what I actually did in the real world. So I think a lot of times going through college is not necessarily, hey, who has a 4.0? It's more so like learning a mindset and a skill set that you can transfer over to the real world.
Yes.
I mean, can you kind of talk about that, and like, even though maybe you didn't have the
Absolutely.
best GPA, how the skills and the mindset that you've learned throughout college helped you be successful later on in life?
Yeah. So one of the biggest skills that I feel like I had that a lot of software engineers didn't was my ability to communicate complicated concepts to people who didn't understand them. And through being able to do that, I landed my consulting internship junior year. And so I think that was one of the turning points in terms of my confidence, but also like I learned how to communicate what an object-oriented programming language is to someone who like might study art. You know what I'm saying? And I think that is a huge value add, especially in corporate America. Because you go from being someone that might be typing away on their computer like a code monkey, which, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. I personally feel like people who love to code, that's an amazing skill, never stop. But you go from being sort of like a coder to a leader. And that was something that at the time I knew it was my strength. I didn't know how I was going to leverage it because it felt like, at the time I need to learn how to be a coder. But I think that was one thing. I think another thing is I took a lot of the classes where you learn strategy and scrum more seriously than like learning bare bones, C programming and stuff like that. Like I took some big data courses as well. And I think understanding the full landscape of what it means to develop a product versus just how can I create this one feature or finish this one project is another key that I think led me to this point, because I'm now making decisions on architecture. I'm deciding what kind of cloud backend we want to use, how we want to run our sprints, what kind of features we want to have, how to plan a release, how many environments we want to work out of before we release something to production, what's our exit criteria. All those kinds of decisions are made when you have a big picture understanding of what it means to develop a product and not a feature.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I think that, but I learned most of that from literally just working with people.
Nice. So, I mean, that's awesome. Communication, project management, all those things have like served you so well throughout your career. And then definitely now in your role as CTO. Eli, you had something?
Yeah, a quick follow-up. Can you define Scrum? I've heard that phrase before in other management contexts, but yeah, if you can define it real quick for the audience.
Yeah, sure. So a Scrum Master is someone that sits above an entire team of not only developers, but QA persons, if you have them, cloud architects. And what they do is they keep the team moving. So I can just use an example. Every 2 weeks, you want to have a certain set of features you might want to build for a tech platform. This is built, Scrum came from what I understand, building tech platforms. And so in order to guide the team in the right direction and give the client what they want, they might not be a technical person, but the Scrum kind of takes what the client wants, spins it into the sprint planning. They conduct a sprint planning. They work with the developer who might understand Java, for example, and say, hey, I need you to build a sign up feature. So the developer builds that sign up feature, and then the Scrum is responsible for making sure that feature gets passed over to the QA. The QA person has access to test that new feature, make sure that it's working. They do their negative testing, their happy testing, whatever you want to call it. Then the QA says, oh yeah, this is good. And then it moves on to the phase in which it's ready to be deployed to the next environment, the next upper environment. And so the Scrum Master is responsible for sprint planning, which means getting all those product stories into tech stories. They're responsible for making sure that those stories are moving and moving quickly. So they run daily stand-ups to check in with the team and make sure everyone's doing what they're supposed to do. They also, sometimes they'll have like a set of statistics that they have to meet. So like you have to meet 80% of the sprint needs to be completed, or 60%, whatever the client, they have to meet those expectations and really keep the product stories organized. So any outstanding features, they also have to make sure that they're keeping those in mind for the next sprint and ultimately the next release.
Thank you for defining that for us. Now, moving forward, we want to get back to your what you do now in Clutch, but before we do that, what pieces of advice would you give an up and coming student, particularly a woman of color, in how to survive a STEM degree?
The one thing I would say, and the one thing that kept me motivated, was understanding my strength and trusting it. Like I knew that my strength was working with people. That sounds super generic, and I don't necessarily know how that was transferable at the time, but now I see how valuable it is. And just don't underestimate your strengths and continue to like lean towards that as you move through your career. And the other thing is never be hesitant about asking for help. I ask for help all the time. Like the more you ask for help, the better off you'll be.
Awesome.
And I know it seems scary, especially as somebody who's like, sticks out, but who cares? Just you're there to get a job done. I don't care what other people think.
That's a great point. Yeah, I think a lot of us think that, hey, you have to do everything on your own. I know when I first went into college, I kind of had that mindset. It was the completely wrong mindset to have. I would think of college more like as a group project in a sense. Like, hey, we could
Yes.
collaborate on this joint. It's not like high school where you can't work on homework together and all that good stuff. So,
Yes.
all right.
Yeah.
Everyone was giving each other the homework and whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like we were all working together. There was no
Yep.
it wasn't possible to get through Purdue without my friends at all.
I got you. My bad. Eli, what you got? You had another question?
100%. 100%. We take for granted how collaborative the learning process really is, especially in STEM. So, along that note, you successfully finished your degree at Purdue. What was your first job, and how'd you acquire it?
Yeah. So my first job was actually at Accenture. Accenture is one of the largest consulting firms in the world, and they specialize in tech consulting. That's where their bread and butter is. And I got an internship with them this summer after I believe it was my sophomore year. So I interned with them as just an analyst for 2 summers in a row. And as a result, they offered me a full-time job. So when I applied and interviewed, I actually did the hardest interview to be an intern rather than a full-time position. So Accenture is one of those places where you get the internship, you're pretty much like they try to hire 90% of the interns that they bring on for full-time roles. So after I graduated, I went straight to Accenture. I came in as an analyst and I was doing a lot of, like I said, tech consulting. I worked on, I think, 4 or 5 different clients across 3 different industries. So that means I was working with a client that was a health insurance, like they were a health insurance place. I can't give you guys the names. Another one was a fashion client. Like they literally created like clothes. They were a brand name. And then I worked for an entertainment industry client. And all 3, I was, helping them with like anything from data mapping to testing a enterprise system, which for those of you that might not understand what that means, basically, how do I run payroll at a company that has like 100,000 people? You need something like an SAP or Salesforce. And so that's what I was helping them introduce and test. So I saw kind of the development life cycle of a product at all 3, or I believe it was 4 clients. I can't remember the 4th one right now, but
one quick follow-up question for that. So did Accenture handle like the entire process in terms of, you sound like you were the scrum master, like the analyst for that project. Did Accenture also have the developers at Accenture, or were they at the client side? How does that kind of work?
Both.
Oh, okay.
So I would actually work with developers from both Accenture and the client. So depending on the contract, Accenture does have their own internal team of developers, but depending on the contract, they might want to hire like a certain amount of people from Accenture and a certain amount of people internally, depending on what their company structure is. Yeah. And so I was on teams where I was working with both Accenture and client developers, which was interesting because I always had to like go to the Accenture developers first with an issue before you kind of bring it to the client. That's kind of the cadence you should follow when you're in consulting. You ask all the dumb questions to your Accenture people, and then you take a solution to the client. That's really what you should be doing, even if they're a developer and analyst themselves. You never want to alert the client that there's anything wrong going on, which is also what helps translate into my skill now, CTO of a company, when you're working with investors. Like, you work everything out internally before you take something to an investor.
Okay, gotcha. Awesome. Hey, so we're getting closer. I want to start getting into like the Clutch, the birth of Clutch. How long were you working at Accenture before you kind of went all in on Clutch? And I guess maybe even before that, when did you and Madison kind of team up and say, hey, let's really go all in on this?
So that's a good question. I was at Accenture for 3 years. So I started in 2018, January 2018, and we started working on what is now Clutch in March of 2019.
Okay.
So I was working full time at Accenture while also building this company with Madison.
I gotcha.
It is now 2021. Is it
Yeah.
2021?
Almost
Yes.
done with it.
I know, it's crazy. She quit her job in June of 2021 to work. We got accepted to an accelerator called Div Inc., which is an accelerator for diverse founders. They also don't take any equity, which again, equity is something where when you start a company, you own a certain piece of it, and you want to make sure that as a founder, you own the majority of it. So me and her have a majority stake in our company. So it's really important to maintain your equity as a founder because it also gives you leverage. In addition to the money aspect, you have leverage and control over your company. So DeVink is unique in that they don't take that equity. They just give you a stipend, and it's for diverse founders specifically. So they were also pivotal in us getting to where we are now. But she joined the accelerator, or we got to the accelerator, so she took it full time. I was still working as a technology consultant, like I said, at Accenture up until November of this year. So I was working full time and also building this company, and I was not getting paid by Clutch by any means until I quit my job. So
Gotcha. I'm glad you mentioned
that's a
that
lot.
because I mean, I know that entrepreneurship, being your own boss, is like really popular right now. But I think like you sharing that, I mean, that sounds stressful because I mean, these tech jobs, they can be demanding, and then not only that, but also trying to grow your own passion project you love and you care about. I'd imagine that's demanding. Can you kind of talk about how your full-time job may have helped prepare you to be successful in your entrepreneurship endeavor?
Oh yeah. I mean, the last project I had was probably the last two projects I had were probably the most instrumental in me gaining the skills that I needed to do what I'm doing now because um and that's why I think it was really important for me to stay at Accenture while we were working on this because it was like a level of training that I got for free that I would have never gotten if I just was like, ooh, let me be my own boss now and quit my job. And you know what I mean? I mean, everyone's journey is different. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not judging that. But I'm just saying for me personally, it was important that I stayed at Accenture because Accenture is a great company. And I actually probably would have never left if we didn't have this. But at my other project, I was leading a team of developers to help with testing the platform. And so learning how to create a test plan, understanding what exit criteria might mean, getting a team of people to do something for you when they might not want to was something that I definitely learned during my time at Accenture. And then I also learned a little bit about like agile practices. So like how to organize a team to work effectively without feeling overwhelmed or like there's a lot of chaos. And like that goes back to release management, which leads into sprint plannings and being a scrum master. So I had also had practice being a scrum master at one point in one of my projects. So I had like 3 different roles, and each one of those roles taught me something different about leading a team and also having structure around a team that leads to productivity and building something that you actually want. And also like level setting your expectations. Not everyone's going to meet your expectations every single time you ask for something. So learning how to communicate and communicate your vision without overwhelming someone, keeping it simple, and building on it rather than doing everything at once.
Gotcha. Free on the job training for your now full-time job. Dope.
Yes,
Yep.
that's what I would call it.
And also paying the bills.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. I just want to say too, like, I know that we're in this world where you're on Instagram and you're on Twitter and you're seeing all of these people, do whatever it is they're doing, whether it's their own side hustle or, marketing their brand as a service. And I think that that's great. I think that it's really cool that people are taking their careers in their own hands. But I also want to emphasize, like, you need to have a certain structure in life in order to feel comfortable leaving your job. Like, I had a foundation by working at Accenture for 3 years. I had a 401k built up. I had savings built up. I had a regular paycheck built up. I also, made the decision to live with my boyfriend, which is a privilege. But now, he's at Amazon, he's money bag. So now I can I can sort of take the pay cut, right? Like I knew that by wanting to build this company, I needed to prepare myself to do that. And I think that that's the difference between, bragging about your 9 to 5 and building a company. You have to strategize. You have to be prepared because I want to be in the best place mentally that I can be to do that. And I think that's really important.
Moneybag Bay. That's cool.
Yes, I know. He's going to be mad that I did that.
That's cool.
Speaking of getting prepared for an entrepreneurial life, you reference an accelerator program, which is awesome. Number one, if you can shout them out one more time. And number two, speak on the benefits of participating in one and what can people do to improve their chances of being accepted into one.
Sure. So we were at Div Inc. It's DIVINC. And they're actually based in Austin. We were a part of their first Houston cohort. They're based in Austin, Texas, excuse me. Preston James, the CEO, he's an amazing guy. And we were part of their first Houston cohort. So there's usually 3, I would say, major benefits of participating in Accelerator. One, they'll give you capital sometimes in exchange for equity. So Div Inc., like I said, they're non-for-profit, so they just give you a stipend. But a lot of other accelerators will give you enough capital to potentially build your product or whatever it is you're trying to build for a certain stake in your company. So that's really good if you're just getting your company off the ground and you need something to build you need money, you need capital to build something. The second benefit of being in an accelerator is the network it provides. So we went from knowing a few people in Houston to now knowing I feel like I know everyone, but maybe I just know everyone in this specific realm of Houston, which is like VC, startups, investors, the jargon. So I think it really helped us build our network here. And we actually were able to identify one of our now advisors through being in that accelerator. His name is Ashley DeWalt. And the primary benefit of being in an accelerator is that they really teach you how to convert your product into something that is consumable by other people. So they teach you, budgeting. They teach you how to market yourself. They teach you what your pitch needs to be to maybe a customer versus an investor. They teach you how to communicate who you are as a company in a concise way that people can understand. So it's almost like a master class in 3 months, or getting your master's in 3 months on learning how to build your company.
That's awesome.
It's like what you don't know. So accelerators kind of fill those gaps in.
Hey, one quick follow-up. I've been doing some research on Div Inc. and other tech accelerators. These all seem like very valuable, but also very competitive. Can you give some quick advice in terms of how to improve your chances of getting accepted into one of these accelerator programs?
Sure. I would say you need to have a really good pitch deck. So a pitch deck is something that tells people about who you are as a founder, what your product is, how you're actually going to make money, and how you're actually going to make money as compared to the other people that are doing something similar to you. So like I would say I'd compare us to like a TaskRabbit, for example. What differentiates you from TaskRabbit? What part of the market, what segment are you grabbing? Like we're targeting like Gen Zs and college students, whereas TaskRabbit might target, people who are a little bit older, out of college, just trying to make a little extra money on the side outside of their normal 9 to 5. So having a really strong pitch deck, and also just bringing yourself and your personality and your story to the table when you're interviewing is huge. Like I've heard a lot of people just say, you all's story is so unique and so interesting that's why we really wanted to invest in you. So don't be afraid to be yourself. And I know as a Black and brown person, that can also be hard because, ourselves might look different than, our, other counterparts, right? So, but it's really important to be professional, but just bring yourself to the table and don't be afraid to flex. Like, whatever's gotten you to the point where you're pitching to an accelerator means that there's something special about you. So like flex that, like make sure people know
Awesome.
I deserve to be here.
That's
You
cool.
are worthy of dignity and respect.
Yes. Yes.
100%.
Gotcha. Hey, so throughout you guys' journey to raising capital for this pre-seed capital for Clutch, you mentioned that you were one of the select few that had a minimal viable product, right? You had something to show. And I think a lot of people are interested in creating a tech startup or an app of some sort. How did you guys create your minimal viable product? And maybe like what recommendation would you have for others who maybe do or don't have a technical background in order to create an MVP?
Yes, that's a good question. So we had, like I mentioned before, there's angels and VCs. We had an angel investor from the very beginning stages who knew what we were doing. He was a trusted person in our inner circle. And he was the one that gave us the capital we needed. So we're coming from a bit of privilege, I want to just say here. And, he was the one that gave us the money we needed to develop it. And so what we originally did was, in order to prove the concept before we even asked for money, was UC Davis has like a research program. And through that research program, students get college credit to work for a startup as research. In exchange, like I said, they get college credit. So we hired, I think, 4 UC Davis students to help us build like a super, super early stage product for their semester's college credit. And then from there, once we were like, oh, like we have something here, we've learned how to work with a team of students to build something. Our angel agreed to give us some investment in exchange for equity. And we used his investment to hire developers. And I want to say too, to back up a little bit, if you don't have the technical background or knowledge to build a tech platform, I would say the first thing you need to do is find an advisor or someone with experience to help you understand what you need to build, to build a cloud-based platform in a cheap way, a cheap and affordable way. Like AWS, super affordable in terms of being able to support the back end of our app. So do your research, find a student maybe that you went to school with or a coworker that has that knowledge. They might want to come on with you as a co-founder. Luckily for Madison and I already had the technical background, but I think it's really key to find someone with that background, whether it's someone in your family, somebody you can trust also, like somebody that you'll be able to work with and trust. So before you hire anybody or spend any money, you want somebody to help you come up with the architecture of what that platform needs to look like. Because sometimes people build stuff off of no-code platforms, and depending on what you're trying to sell, those aren't dynamic enough at this point in time for you to use them, in my opinion, to sell through to investors or pitch to investors. They're not really, I shouldn't say that. I think some people do, end up using no code in order to get to, you know, a product. But that's just me giving my 2 cents.
Gotcha.
Anyway,
No,
sorry, getting off
that's
track.
cool. I mean, I think that's valuable because I mean, I think like Bubble, was it Bubble IO, like these no code platforms where you literally just go to a website and it kind of walks you through building an app. It sounds like quick and easy, but maybe there's certain situations where it doesn't work for what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that. All right, cool. So we're doing okay on time. I'm gonna try and do the next. So I got like 5 professional development questions. Let's see if we can like knock these out in like 5 minutes. Is that all right with you?
Rapid fire.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
So I mean, disclaimer or forewarning, I am going to be asking like about money, salaries, lifestyle, stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So let's get into it. So what's like the typical salary and benefits for an employee at Accenture, like a consultant at Accenture? If you don't want to give the specific amount, you can feel free to give a range also.
Oh no, I think it's important to get specific. So
let's do it. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Simone.
Yeah. So when I started Accenture as an analyst, this was 3 years ago, and I was starting out in Atlanta. So the base salary was $75,000 a year, and then that came with about 2 weeks of PTO. What they do is they let you accumulate hours every pay period, which is like biweekly. So, or what they call semi-monthly. So you can actually go negative when you first start, which is kind of weird, but eventually you can accumulate about 20 days of PTO. The health benefits, crazy, insane. You can get like the best healthcare through Accenture. I started with Kaiser because I didn't know any better, but then I switched to Aetna, like when I moved to Texas. And yeah, so that's about it. The only other thing I would say is there's some cities like New York, San Francisco, where you can ask for a little bit more if you're coming in as a consulting analyst. So I just want to be clear that I came in as a consulting development program analyst. And that's what I started as my base. But in New York and San Francisco, they might start you at something closer to 85, 90 because of the difference in cost of living.
Okay, cool. What's like the typical like salary raise every year? And then also, do you get like a bonus as well annually?
Yeah, so Accenture is actually really good in my opinion in the sense that they give you a higher raise for the first 3 years over like a nice bonus. So I think during my second year at Accenture, I got like a 10, I don't know, like a third, I don't know what the exact percentage is. I got a $10,000 raise.
Okay.
So I started making 85 the next year, and then I got like a $3,000 bonus. So like I said, the bonuses aren't really high, but the raises are what matters because that means you can put more money towards your 401k and towards your savings. I believe in, saving more and just living the same way. And then, yeah, after that, I got a $15,000 raise. So I ended with 6 figures before I left as a consultant.
Awesome. All right, cool. Throughout your career, do you have any experience with like salary negotiations? And if so, do you have any advice for people who need help?
That is one sad thing. I don't have experience with salary negotiation, and here's why. The way Accenture works, and maybe somebody can hopefully combat this and say, well, here's what I did. But when you are going up for promotion or even doing your performance evaluations, you're not there in the room. It's your career counselor is what they call it. And so your career counselor basically goes to bat for you. And based on that conversation, in addition to the performance evaluations that your managers on your project submit, you come in at a certain percentage or criteria. So let's say you're the top 5% performer at Accenture, which I actually think throughout my time there, I was in at least the top 5% given my raises. So that means you get a certain percentage of a raise and a certain percentage bonus.
Gotcha.
So they base it off of this like sliding scale. Now that's not to say there might not be any room for negotiation, but to be honest, I was happy where I was. So like I never really asked, but I did get some really good advice on negotiation just based on now having to negotiate a lot of different things. And you always need to have like some sort of backup. like something that says, for example, I have $100,000 in student loans. I need you guys to give me this much extra a month or this much extra a year to make up for the fact that I'm not going to be able to live the same lifestyle as somebody coming in with no student loans. So that's an example of like a negotiation tactic where it's real data. It's something that's you can actually leverage and make a case for giving me more money, or maybe you negotiate for more vacation days because you have children. Like I have a child, I'm a non-traditional college student. I need 3 weeks of vacation versus 2.
Gotcha. Awesome. Now some more still professional development, but more so as your more related to your role here as CTO of Clutch. If you had to recommend one programming language for somebody to start off with or to learn, what would you recommend?
What I will say is like Java, JavaScript. That's what, Node.js.
Yeah, I got you. On the back end.
JS, those types of languages would be what I suggest, because I think that's what a lot of these like frameworks use. C, low level based programming isn't as necessary to know anymore unless you're, working with hardware, I guess. But
cool. No, that's good to know. Also, as a CTO, you're now like employing and hiring a staff of developers and everything like that. What characteristic traits, either hard skills or soft skills, are you looking for when you're determining if you're going to hire somebody or not?
Yeah, so in terms of hard skills, I'm looking for someone that obviously has experience with multiple languages. And depending on if it's front end or back end, that also plays a role in the decision. But somebody who knows multiple languages, has experience with doing their own project is something that's really attractive to me. And I think even large companies as well, like somebody who's so passionate that they've done their own things outside of just the projects at school. What else? Also like a well-rounded student. So maybe you took all the coding courses that you needed as a software developer, but you also took like a language course or something that kind of sets you apart. Then, like I said, just being somebody who just sits there and codes on their computer all day, especially at a startup, like we need somebody that has like a diverse way of thinking. And so that kind of leads me into my soft skills, which I would prefer somebody who is confident enough to push back when they think that I'm wrong, because that's really important. I don't know everything. In fact, I say my team is much smarter than me. Okay. Like I am here just to pull the strings. You guys are the magicians.
Gotcha.
So like, or, whatever. And so somebody who's open to pushing back, very passionate about what they're doing and loves what they do to the point where like, I don't have to ask them for more. Like all of my developers, but 2 of them specifically, like they go out of their way to go above and beyond what I even ask for. And I think I look for that kind of personality trait in people, like people who are extremely passionate and just willing to do the work. Like being at a startup, we try to make it as easy as possible. We give people unlimited PTO. I think we pay them pretty on par with even like companies that obviously have a lot more capital than we do. And so in exchange for that, we expect you to be able to like deliver at certain times and be flexible.
Gotcha. Cool. All right, last one real quick. So a lot of us, our experience is college, but there's really a big boom in like coding boot camps, as well as like just online certification programs and just building your own portfolio. Like maybe somebody took a Coursera course or something like that. As an employer, what if you had to pick something that you value the most, what would you value the most? Degrees, certifications, or a portfolio displaying what you can do talent wise?
Probably a portfolio.
Okay.
And that's only because that shows me I feel like startups I want to keep going back to the fact that this is a startup, because startups are specific and we want to hire people that are independently ambitious and like we know that they'll do the work because they're just as passionate about the product as we are. I'm not saying you have to love it as much as I do and be married to it as much as I do, but we want somebody that like goes, out of their way to do their own things and has proof that they've been able to build something on their own. I think degrees, I personally like to shy away from requiring that someone has to have a degree to work for us, because I just feel like that's limiting. That limits us and that limits other people. And certifications, I think I would look for more in like a leadership role, but not necessarily in a role where you're like building something bare bones almost from the ground up.
Gotcha. All right, cool.
Simone, as a follow-up to that, for someone that's coming into college, deciding between getting a degree or getting certified, what would you advise them?
I would say, based on your situation financially, you need to heavily weigh, is it worth me going into extreme debt depending on what kind of job I'm going to come out with? And if I am going to come out guaranteed with a job, like for example, Purdue, I think is 40 grand a year. I came from a privileged background. My parents had enough money to support my college journey. So I made the decision to go to Purdue, not only because I had the privileged background, but I also was studying something that I knew I would come out with a lucrative career. But if I went to Purdue and studied, and I'm gonna make some people mad, liberal arts, you know what I'm saying? Like, I might not have come out with the same income that I did. I probably would not have, in fact. And on top of that, my parents would have been pissed because they paid all this money for me to now still be struggling anyway. So I think sometimes it's worth it to pay less to get a certification. And there are companies out there, especially startups, that will hire you if you can display a certain skill set. So I personally feel like, depending on your situation, if you have the support financially from your family or scholarship or whatever, then yeah, definitely go for it. But do I think it would have been worth 40 grand a year to go to Purdue and have, like $500 to $1,000 a month on my student loan and struggle? No, because Google will hire people without college degrees,
Facts.
as long as you can prove that you have a certain skill set. But I also got a lot out of Purdue in terms of like resume building, community. So that, it has its benefits.
Delta. Cool. You're a Delta too,
no.
right? All right.
Yes.
Cool.
Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
All
To be
right.
exact.
My bad. Eli, take it away, man.
No, that's a perfect follow-up question maybe for the IG chat later about your experience with sororities and fraternities. But thank you, Simone, so much for spending some time with us, sharing your story. We have one last big picture question. And the purpose of this big picture question is that more often than not, I find that people that look like us, talk like us, we're not often asked what a just world, more equitable world looks like, and how do we get there. And so in that same vein, I'd like to ask, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe theme, if you had the Infinity Gauntlet and you can snap your fingers and change one thing right now, what would you do to bring more people of color, more women of color into the STEM fields? Yes, this can be a policy change on a national scale or something that individuals can do, whatever's most important for you that you feel would be most effective.
It's a good question.
Eli, you always have so much fun with this one.
I know, it's such a philosophical question.
Well,
I think if I could snap my fingers to create a more equitable world, I would probably, so based on my knowledge and understanding of everything that's been taken from us, I would go back in time, or use that to go back in time and prevent resources being taken from Africa, and in those resources being taken from these places, like even the Middle East, Africa, whatever you want to call it, allowing them to have those resources and sell them on their own dime rather than it being taken from us and sold at a higher cost, even though they're taking it for lower. And then I'd also do the same in America, where there were a lot of Black people who had built up wealth, built opportunity, built an education for themselves, and that was also taken away from them. So at each point in time in which those things were taken from us, I would prevent that from happening and give it back, because I think the world would look a lot different.
Dope. I love it. No, that's awesome.
All right. Well, on that note, Simone, thank you for joining us today and sharing your journey with us. And amazing conversation, amazing experiences and answers you have for us. Please check out Clutch. You can check that out at www.thatsclutch.com, as well as the App Store and Google Play. And Simone, anything else you want to shout out or promote?
No, I thank you guys. I think I hit on all the places I wanted to shout out. Divang, we love you guys.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Simone. We'll be talking soon.
No problem.
So
Yes, I appreciate it.
for Custom Journeys, I'm Eliseo, here with my co-host Andrew Baines, and we're out of here.
Peace.
Bye.